Hello and welcome back to Retfurb. So on today's video we've got this Mission Cyrus One amplifier, which as you can see is seen better days. So it's got loads of random stickers stuck on it and has also got damage on the top. And I bought this as not working, so I need to sort of check to see what's what first of all. I just sort of shook it then because you can hear something rattling around in there. So the first thing we need to do is get into the side of it and have a look and see if we can work out what the problem is. Now this is purchased off the internet recently. I took a risk on it. I was sort of hoping that there wouldn't be anything too much. It wouldn't take too much to rectify the issues. I knew it obviously had all the damage on the outside that needed doing, but I was hoping again I could do that pretty easily. So yeah, as you can see, I'm just getting inside, just undoing the screws, just remove the tape that was holding it together. Some of the screws are actually missing on it, which I find out later. So I've actually replaced some of them at the end. But yeah, so now those screws are removed, you can take the lid off. You got to remove the earth nut, and then the case can then be lifted off. So first impressions looking inside, it's not too bad, a little bit dusty, but other than that it's not too bad. Now straight away, once I looked around a bit, at this point I've been looking around a little bit longer than I actually show in the video, and I could see one of the fuses looked like it might have blown. So here I'm just popping that fuse out and I'm just going to quickly test it, and just to see whether it is blown, which doing this it shows that it is an open circuit. And I just get the other fuse out just to double check that one as well and make sure that there's no issues with the multimeter or anything when I'm doing it. And you can see that one's absolutely fine. So obviously the first thing I'm going to do here is change the fuse, and then hopefully that rectifies the issue. Now obviously there was a reason for that fuse going in the first place. Could have just been some sort of electrical surge that did it. Could be something inside. But yeah, the first thing to do is replace it and see if that works, and then see if it blows again. So now I'm just pointing out that the fuse is 3.158 amp. So now we just do a quick test and see if it works. So as you can see from the test, it's all working all okay. So I had a quick look round and just made sure that there's nothing that looked burnt out or anything like that within the circuit board, and it all looked fine. I had it running for quite a while after that, just to make sure that it sort of got up to temperature and there's no issues, changing the volume, everything like that. And there was no issues with it blowing another fuse, so I'm hoping it was just triggered from sort of outside influence to the amplifier, maybe a power surge or something. I am actually now going to strip it down and refurb the case, refurb all the control knobs. I'm going to do a capacitor change on all the electrolytic capacitors. Going to keep the main filter caps because I think they'll be okay. They don't look like a solder or anything like that. To be fair, the other ones don't, but there are a couple of capacitors in the amplifier that are known to be faulty capacitors. They get issues with them, so I'm going to replace all the small electrolytic capacitors. And as you can see here, I'm just pointing out these knobs, they're quite worn. This is quite common for these Cyrus amps. The knobs wear down, the black on them just flakes off. So I'm going to repaint them, and then I'm going to make some decals to go on the front faces of them, so they've got the dials back on there. But yeah, other than that, the amplifier, you know, it seems okay now. It needs a good clean. As you can see here, there's quite a bit of cobwebs and stuff in there. But yeah, I think this is going to turn out to be quite a nice little amplifier, to be honest. Once it's all been refinished, the cover and everything's had a good clean inside, then yeah, it should be quite a nice little amp. So now I'm just going to remove the circuit board. So I'm just undoing the screws on here. Like I said before, there is some screws that are missing, and someone had put some random screws in there. So someone has obviously been in here at some point messing around, probably trying to have a look to see what the issues are, probably couldn't work it out and then got rid of it. So yeah, hopefully doing all this work, it's going to be worth it, and yeah, then it'll be a nice little amp for someone. So now at this point you just need to be a bit careful because there's an earth cable that's holding the cable to the chassis, and also there's some cable ties where I'm just snipping off here, which has got the cable that goes for the main power to the actual transformer. And now I'm just snipping off the power cables there. I'm just going to solder these back on. So you can see here I'm just removing the solder on the joints, just getting them ready for when I come to put it all back together. Just makes it quicker when it comes to the point when everything's going back together and I haven't got to worry about doing this cleanup. Just removing that solder on there. Now at this point you can see I'm removing the chassis earth strap, and then I decided actually I don't need to remove it, so I just solder that back on. And now just making sure, going around, just checking, making sure everything's safe. Just making sure that there's no voltages left in any of the capacitors, the main two filter capacitors. And I did go around on the other capacitors, I didn't actually show it there. And now I'm just going over and just giving it a quick brush off just before I start the work on it. Just brushing it off, and then I'll go around with a hoover, which I don't actually show, but just hoovering it up, making sure it's nice and clean. Like I said before, it's not too bad. This amplifier is pretty good. It's minimal dust and that on it. So now I'm just going to go through and just show some of the capacitors, taking them out. I'm not going to go through and show every single one of them because it'll all be the same process. But I'm just using the soldering iron, my trusty Milwaukee that I use on all my videos that don't require anything sort of really delicate. But like I said before, to be honest, it does a lot. It's not exactly the lightest of weight soldering irons, and you know, you can get something probably a little bit more detailed, but I really like it. It's my go-to soldering iron, definitely. And just using the solder sucker just to remove the solder. So at this point I thought it'd be best idea to remove this heatsink. So here I'm just removing the two screws that's holding that in place. And now just removing the capacitors. Now these two orange capacitors that are shown here, they were a bit of a pain to get out. I had to wiggle them out a little bit, and one of them left one of the legs in there. It just wasn't coming out very well. You can see that the solder had there was nothing bridged, it was loose, but for some reason that leg wouldn't come out. Whether it was spade at the end of it, I don't know. And now just fixing those new capacitors in place, just making sure that I got the correct orientation, and then we can turn it over, put a little bit of flux on there and just solder that in place. Now a lot of the capacitors on this board are bipolar capacitors, so there's no orientation of them, but there are some which you've got to make sure that the orientation of the plus and minus are the right way around. On the circuit board it shows this when you take them out, so just be sure that if it doesn't show it, you make sure you put them in the correct way. And just snipping off the legs. So this is the first time that I've done a Cyrus One amplifier, and to be honest I was quite lucky with it with regards to buying it untested and not working, that it was an easy fix. And like I say, there's been no issues with it since. I was quite lucky with it, to be honest. I've been lucky with a couple of amplifiers that I bought recently which were not working or untested, and they've been easy fixes. Luckily on this one again, this one was an easy fix, so yeah. And I do really like this Cyrus amp. It sounds really nice, and the good thing about it is it's only got the volume control, and then you've got the selection for inputs and output, and that's it. There's no tone controls, no balance, no nothing like that, which I really like. I think that when you put too much on an amplifier, it just overcomplicates it, and also it's just, you know, you're filtering in fake noise, if you know what I mean. It's like you're putting in more bass, or you're taking out bass, or you're putting in more treble. It's best just to play it as it was intended from the input device. That's my opinion anyway. I know some people obviously like to use tone controls and put in more bass and stuff, but for me I just prefer leaving it all on the standard middle control. So you see I'm just gradually working through the capacitors, just changing them still. Like I said before, they're all the same process, so there's no need to show every one of them. So now I'm going to go on to doing the shell. Now I'm just removing this small faceplate, and this is the plate where all the inputs and outputs and everything goes in, and just needs a general wipe off. I'll give it another clean when I get in there again anyway. Now I'm just using some solvent-based degreaser just to soften the adhesive on these stickers. Now these were a pain to get off. They took me ages of scratching to try and remove them, so I'm not going to bore people by just watching me scratch it off. So here it is with all the decals removed. They took a while, as I said before, and yeah, it looks better straight away. So now I'm going to look at repairing these fins for the vents. Now I've got some 3mm perspex sheet that I was trying to think what I could use to do it, and I measured the size of it, and it was around 3mm. It was just below 3mm, I think. So this 3mm perspex, I just cut off a strip on the end of it, turn on its side. You can see there it's pretty much perfect. I just need to cut the lengths and then slot them in, glue them in place. But yeah, it was a nice, easy way of doing this. After doing that, I'm just going around tidying it up with a file, just tidying at the ends and just gradually putting it in so I've got a snug fit. I don't want it loose. I want it to go in there so it's fairly tight, not too tight that you're going to damage it going in, but just enough to hold it in place, and then put some glue on there and it should be solid then. So I'm just using my small little Dremel and just taking an end off. Obviously you can just use sandpaper or just use the file and just keep taking it down with a file and then just push it in. Obviously the bit underneath, you know, if it's a little bit proud underneath, it doesn't really matter. You don't want it sticking out miles underneath, but you know, if it's a few millimeter and it's sticking out underneath, it's not going to foul on anything inside the amplifier. So you don't need to worry about that. You want the nicest part on the top, obviously, where you can see it. So you can see I'm just gradually doing each piece, doing exactly the same, just filing them down, getting them right, and just lining them all up. And yeah, that was, you know, perfect. I'm glad I had this bit of perspex lying around. It was perfect for the 3mm. And now I'm just using a cocktail stick and just going around with a little bit of super glue and just gluing it all in place. Just being careful, I don't want a bit too much glue. And then just making sure I'm wiping down in between, making sure there's no excess left. And then I've got a bit of bicarbonate soda, so I've just put a tiny bit of glue on top on the joints and just sprinkling a bit of bicarb on the top. And then I can get some sandpaper and just smooth it over. Now I've gone with a little bit more of a coarser grade. First of all, you don't want to go too mad, but just going over gently just to remove the worst of it, and then just going over with some 2000 wet and dry just to get it nice and smooth. Now you could take a long time to do this and get it absolutely perfect. Now I think it came out pretty well, to be honest. I could have spent a little bit longer maybe and got it a little bit better. You could see a couple of little marks on it, but it was very minimal. It was hardly anything. You wouldn't notice it just sort of looking at it. You'd have to really be looking at the area to point it out. And this is it recoated. Now I used a texture spray to go over it first of all, just to give it a bit of a texture, very light texture. Just nib that texture off a little bit with a bit of 2000, and then went over it with some grey top coat and just finished it off. And as you can see, it looks pretty factory. I'm really happy with how it's turned out. Actually, the fins look great. You know, like I say, if you were really looking at it, maybe you could spot it, but yeah, you'd have to be really looking at it closely and someone would have to point it out to you. And now again, just doing the same on the front, just cleaning that up, prepping the surface, just degreasing it, a bit of solvent-based degreaser, and then just masking up the faceplate at the bottom, and then just using a bit of masking tape on there and just trimming it with a blade into all the corners, and then that'll just cover it for when I coat it. I'll put a link in the description of the texture spray that I used, or something similar to what I used. It's always worth, when you're doing a texture spray, just nibbing it off. You don't want it too rough. When you first put it on, you'll find that it's quite rough. So you need to just nib that off before you put a top coat on it. And just making sure that it's nice and degreased. So you can see here again, it's all coated. So again, the texture spray and then the grey coat over the top, and I'm just removing the masking tape off the nameplate. And yeah, I'm really happy with how that came out. And now onto the knobs. So these again, I'm just going to sand them down with nothing too coarse, something like 600 grade, and then I'm just going to recoat them black. And then now I've made the decals to go on the front of them, so you can see at this point I've painted them, so they look pretty spot on, and they just need those decals to go on there. And then once the decals are fitted, then I'm going to go over with some aerosol lacquer just to seal them in and just give them a protective coating. and also with the aerosol lacquer it doesn't go proper high gloss, it just gives it a bit of a sheen, which is what I wanted. These buttons don't look high gloss from original, they're more of a sheen on them. So this is them all lacquered with the decals on, and you can see they look absolutely perfect, ideal now to go in the amplifier. I tried to get them as close as I could with all the lettering and the font type and everything like that, and you can see they come out pretty well. And now I'm just cleaning off the heat shield inside the amplifier, just getting ready to put it all back together. And then I've got some thermal paste that I'm just going to put on before I put the heat sink back on there. And just putting the screws back in, just lining it back up. And just screwing that in place. Now just being careful to put the transformer back in place. And now I'm going to solder these main input cables for the power back on the connector at the back of the amplifier shell. And then just cable tying the cable back onto the shell. And now getting everything back into position to screw the main circuit board back into the lower shell. And I'm just checking that I've got that transformer in place properly, that it's not going to foul with the cables that are coming out of it. And just screwing that back down. I always like to just nip them up as I go around and then tighten them up again, just to make sure that I've got everything located properly and I'm not tightening it all down straight away and causing any issues as I'm doing it. And then just screwing the transformer in place. And then putting the LED light back in the front panel, and then just putting the front panel back on. Just being careful locating that, it's got to be located properly at the bottom to line up the screws. Now the small plastic bits were missing on the front plate on this, they're all broken off, so I've got some washers with some new screws and just securing that back down, and they seem to be holding that in place well. So now I'm going to apply some deoxit onto all the potentiometers, just spraying that into the openings on the side of the potentiometers and then working them around to get that deoxit in to clean them and lubricate them. It's mainly the volume potentiometer on that one, but I did spray a little bit into the other two just to give that a little bit of lubricant as well. Now putting the main shell back on. Just carefully sliding this in place, try not to scratch anything when I'm putting it back together. So I actually purchased a pack of universal, I think they were M3 screws on this. And yeah, they worked really well. I got them from Amazon. There was a pack of them which came in handy because, like I say, there was something that was missing. So now that I've replaced them, they all look uniform now, and yeah, they look a lot better. Everything's all secured nicely in place with these compared to what was in there. I think someone had put some random sort of wood screws in there as well in some points. So now to put the control knobs back in. So these just literally push in place, but obviously you've got to make sure that you line it all up when you're doing it. You want it to be obviously in the right place when it's on minimum and maximum. The same goes for the input and output knobs. You want to make sure they're in the right place for selection. So now we can get on and do a quick demo of it working. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this looks. So let's make sure that it sounds as good as it looks. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video, it's really appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.